Today is the day that makes us Christians. Jesus' life and teaching were beautiful and inspiring until Easter Sunday. But if his life had ended on Good Friday, it would still have a beauty to it, and we would have admired it. But if that were the end of the story, it would have been the story of heroic goodness, defeated in the end by the forces of sin, darkness, and death. It would have been a heroic defeat, but a defeat nonetheless. I doubt that many of us would want to live a life modeled on that life. It is Easter Sunday that makes the gospel story for us a story of hope, one that calls us to follow Jesus as his disciples because he lives. Given that it is such a big day, we might expect a more spectacular gospel story. What we have here is the story of Mary and Peter and John finding an empty tomb. It's a story of an absence, not of a presence. Now, in the Gospels, Jesus performed some wonderful miracles. In Matthew and Luke's Gospel, during a violent storm, he calms the seas and the winds, and the disciples are amazed. When he goes up the mountain with Peter and James and John, he's transfigured before them. His clothes are dazzling white, and a voice thunders, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." And a little earlier, in John's Gospel, Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. He's in the tomb, wrapped up in burial clothes, and Jesus calls him forth, and he walks around in front of the astounded crowd as they see this dead man come out. Why don't we have something more spectacular today on Easter Sunday? What is the gospel telling us? Well, one thing the gospel is telling us is that Jesus' resurrection is not like Lazarus's. Lazarus is brought out of the tomb, but he goes back to the life he had previously lived. Lazarus' raising is simply a continuation of his life before death. He's raised, and he goes back to live with his sisters, Martha and Mary, just as he did before. Another example, more recent example of this kind of thing, may be the TV show, The Good Place, from a few years ago. Some of you may have seen that one. In this show, all the humans are assigned either to the good place or the bad place. A key character is a woman named Eleanor Shellstrop. Although Eleanor did not live such an exemplary life on earth, she went to the good place when she died. Now, as you can imagine, if there are 4 seasons of this show, there's a lot of drama in that show. And Eleanor and her characters go through this drama, and in the course of it, they grow as people. In the end, once they work through all that drama, they can enjoy this wonderful place with all their desires fulfilled, for food, for entertainment, for interesting trips, for anything they want, there at the snap of a finger. It is really a continuation of life on earth, just in the luxury first-class version of that life. However, with time, Eleanor and friends grow bored with it. Even that luxury first-class life becomes boring after a few millennia. And so they seek their own extinction and seek to effect it. Jesus, however, made it clear that he was not going to a place like that. When the disciples asked him at the Last Supper, "Where are you going?" He says, "I am going to the Father." The Father, course, is God the Father, the creator and sustainer of everything. God is beyond our ability to understand or imagine. God is a mystery, and it is into that mystery that Jesus invites us. But although God is a mystery, we have a sense of God through our own longing. As St. Augustine said so famously, God made us for himself, and our hearts are made to be restless until they rest in God. That is why Eleanor Shellstrop and her TV friends on The Good Place become bored even with an existence that has all the wonderful delights of the world at the snap of a finger. For it is not creaturely goods that we seek. Although God is beyond our understanding, we know God as the object of our longing. It is into that life that Jesus invites us. And the empty tomb on Easter Sunday is meant to point the way to that place for which our heart longs. That mystery cannot be presented in the readings for us. It's beyond our understanding and experience in this life. But we can experience the way to it. Remember when Philip asked Jesus at the Last Supper, "Lord, show us the way to the Father." What does Jesus respond? I am the way and the truth and the life. So, after finding the empty tomb, the disciples, either individually or in groups, encounter Jesus, the way. He appears to Mary when she's looking for the body. Jesus speaks her name, and she tries to embrace him. To Thomas, when he had doubts about Jesus' resurrection, and Jesus says, "Put your hands in my wounds." On the road to Emmaus, the disciples are talking, trying to understand, and Jesus comes among them and explains to them, and then they recognize him in the breaking of the bread. And to Peter, when he gives him the charge, "Feed my lambs and feed my sheep." In the story of the resurrection, we are not presented with the fullness of life with the Father. That's beyond our ability to understand in this life, to comprehend in this life. But we are presented with the way, with Jesus. He overcomes sin and death and will lead us to the Father. And that is something each and every one of us has access to. Because we encounter Jesus in these readings from Scripture. We encounter Jesus in this Mass as we eat his body and drink his blood. And we encounter him individually in our own prayer. And each of us, in our own way, in our own lives. The fullness of life with God is what we long for. We know it through our longing. And today we are given the hope of attaining it. To be a Christian is to be on a pilgrimage, on a journey toward that life. And we are given the way. Jesus. On this day, when he has definitively overcome sin and death, let's recommit ourselves to following that way on this Easter Sunday.